It was a crisp autumn morning in Dixon, Kentucky. The kind of morning when the light hits just right, and even the smallest moments feel like something bigger is coming. For years, fans of 1000 LB Sisters had watched Tammy Slaton struggle, cry, laugh, and fight for her life on screen. But no one, not even her most loyal viewers, could have imagined the woman she was about to become. Tammy had always been a fighter, even when the world didn't see it that way. The early years of the show painted her as the sister who couldn't catch a break, the one held back by oxygen tanks, frustration, and fear. But beneath the sarcasm and anger was something raw, a woman who wanted to live, to breathe freely, to move without pain. By 2020, Tammy's situation had reached a breaking point. Her weight had peaked at 725 pounds, and even the simplest movements became impossible. Breathing required oxygen support. Standing unaided was a luxury. And walking, once something she took for granted, had become a daily battle. Still, something inside her refused to surrender. Amy, her younger sister, had always been her rock. But even their bond had been tested over the years. Amy's journey toward health had started earlier, and by 2019, she'd undergone bariatric surgery, a life-changing step that helped her shed almost 200 pounds. Her transformation inspired fans, but it also placed a silent distance between the sisters. Tammy wanted to be proud, but jealousy and shame often spoke louder than love. Amy's life was evolving fast. She was becoming a mother, finding love again, and trying to balance her own happiness with Tammy's struggles. Through it all, the cameras kept rolling. Viewers watched every high and low, but behind the scenes, Tammy's fight was becoming more private, more personal. By the time the pandemic hit, Tammy's health was at its lowest point. Isolation, emotional pain, and physical strain had taken their toll. But sometimes rock bottom can be the start of everything. In those quiet months, when no one else could visit, when she had only her own reflection to face, something shifted. Tammy decided that if she wanted to live, she had to save herself. The decision to enter a rehabilitation center for medical weight loss wasn't easy. It meant leaving her family, the cameras, and the comfort of home. But it also meant hope. Tammy's first days in rehab were painful, physically and emotionally. Simple movements felt impossible, and the food restrictions tested her patience. But each day she found small victories, taking 2 extra steps, breathing without the oxygen mask for a few minutes, or waking up without pain in her chest. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy, but progress began to show. With every pound lost, Tammy rediscovered pieces of herself, pieces she thought had disappeared long ago. She learned how to manage her emotions without turning to food. She learned that health wasn't just about size. It was about freedom. Months later, when she finally qualified for bariatric surgery, it felt like crossing an invisible finish line. The surgery wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Recovery tested her like never before. But this time, something was different. Tammy wasn't doing it for the cameras, the fans, or even her family. She was doing it for herself. And then came the moment no one expected. In the months that followed, the changes became dramatic. By late 2023, Tammy had shed more than 500 pounds, bringing her weight down to around 285 pounds, a number that once seemed impossible. Fans who had followed her since day one were speechless. The same woman who once struggled to breathe without oxygen was now walking freely, climbing into cars, and even standing for long periods. Tammy's joy was quiet but powerful. In an interview, she shared, "What seems small to most people, walking, breathing without oxygen, sitting in a normal car seat, those are huge for me. I never thought I'd get here." Her words resonated deeply. For years, Tammy had been a symbol of struggle, but now she was a symbol of triumph. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, but her journey wasn't over. There was one more hurdle to face: the skin removal surgery. After such a massive weight loss, Tammy was left with excess skin, a constant reminder of her past, and a physical burden that caused pain and limited movement. Her doctors warned it would take multiple surgeries and months of recovery. It wouldn't be easy, but Tammy was ready. During a September 2024 episode of 1000 LB Sisters, cameras captured the moment she met with her surgeon. The doctor explained the process with both caution and optimism. "You've got head-to-toe loose skin," he told her. "This will take several operations and several healing phases." Tammy nodded, her eyes full of determination. For the first time, she wasn't scared of the process. She was ready to embrace it. By early 2025, she got the green light for her first major skin removal procedure. The day she was approved, Tammy broke down in tears. "I worked really hard for this," she said. "I was shocked, overwhelmed with joy. It finally feels like I'm being rewarded for not giving up." And that's how it all led to this moment, Amy's wedding day. A day not just for love, but for transformation. On that October afternoon in Bardstown, Kentucky, Tammy Slaton stepped out of her car looking like a completely different person. Gone was the oxygen tube. Gone was the wheelchair. Instead, she walked tall. In a black and gray striped turtleneck sweater and black jeans, her new silhouette radiating confidence. The wedding venue, Talbot Tavern, stood in warm autumn light, an old historic inn filled with charm and mystery. The Halloween decorations gave it a playful yet haunting touch, perfect for Amy, who had always loved the spooky and the sentimental alike. But all eyes that day weren't on the bride just yet. They were on Tammy. When fans first saw the pictures published by People magazine on October 31st, they were stunned. Comment sections lit up across social media. "Tammy looks amazing. I didn't even recognize her. She's lost so much weight. I'm proud of her. This is the Tammy we've been waiting to see." For Tammy, the praise wasn't about fame. It was about peace. Every compliment reminded her that all those long nights, hospital stays, and emotional breakdowns had been worth it. She stood beside Amy, who was radiant in her lace wedding gown, and for the first time in years, the sisters looked not like patients or fighters, but simply family. Amy's journey had come full circle, too. After years of heartbreak, motherhood, and rebuilding her life, she had found love again with Brian Lavvern, a kind-hearted man who embraced her two sons, Gage and Glenn, as his own. The wedding wasn't just about two people coming together. It was about healing the family. Tammy smiled through tears as she watched Amy walk down the aisle. Behind that smile was a lifetime of memories, laughter, pain, fights, and forgiveness. And as the vows were spoken, Tammy realized something profound. She hadn't just lost weight. She had gained her life back. When the ceremony ended, the sisters hugged tightly. It wasn't just a wedding day embrace. It was the closing of one chapter and the start of another. For years, they had been defined by numbers, by scales, by the show's title. But in that moment, they were simply Tammy and Amy. Sisters, survivors, and symbols of strength. Outside, as the autumn wind carried the sound of music and laughter, Tammy looked up at the Kentucky sky. It was the same sky she had stared at from her hospital bed years ago, wondering if she'd ever see this day. Now she was standing tall, unrecognizable, not just in body but in spirit. This was her new beginning. And it was only the start. The wedding bells that echoed through Bardstown, Kentucky, weren't just announcing another ceremony. They were marking a turning point, not only for Amy Slaton, but for the entire 1000 LB Sisters family. The location itself was legendary. The Talbot Tavern, one of Kentucky's oldest inns, rumored to be haunted by spirits from centuries past. Flickering lights, whispers in the hallways, and old portraits that seemed to watch you as you passed. For Amy, it was perfect. Halloween had always been her favorite holiday, and this eerie yet beautiful venue reflected exactly who she was. A mix of sweetness and spooky charm. Guests gathered under the golden autumn sky, the air crisp with October chill. The scent of wood smoke drifted through the streets, mingling with laughter and music from inside the tavern. Amy wanted her wedding to feel warm, intimate, and a little magical, something that felt like a second chance at love. Then, as the door opened, heads turned. Tammy Slaton had arrived. It took a moment for people to recognize her. The woman who once relied on a wheelchair, who breathed with the help of oxygen tubes, now walked on her own, standing tall and confident. She wore a simple black and gray striped turtleneck sweater and black jeans, understated yet elegant. She didn't need glitter or sequins. The glow came from her face, from the way she carried herself. Tammy's transformation was so striking that even Amy gasped softly when she saw her sister walk in. For years, Amy had worried if Tammy would live to see moments like this. Yet here she was, alive, radiant, and proud. Fans who later saw the pictures couldn't believe their eyes. Tammy had lost more than 500 pounds since 2020. She'd dropped from 725 to 285 pounds, a transformation few thought possible. Her new figure told the story of years of pain, resilience, and discipline. But for Tammy, the number on the scale was never the real victory. On the scale was never the real victory. She used to talk about what freedom meant to her, not the kind of freedom that comes from fame or money, but simple things others took for granted. Walking without a walker, breathing without oxygen, fitting into a car seat and buckling the seatbelt without an extender, sleeping through the night without a breathing machine. She once said in an interview, "What seems minor to people is giant to me." And now, standing beside her sister on the most important day of Amy's life, Tammy finally understood what she meant. Amy, glowing in her lace gown, was surrounded by her closest family and friends. Her two little boys, Gage and Glenn, ran around laughing, their tiny tuxedos slightly crooked. Brian Lavvern, her fiancé, stood nervously near the altar, adjusting his tie and stealing glances toward the door. He wasn't just marrying Amy. He was becoming part of a family that had lived much of its life under public scrutiny, but none of that mattered to him. Amy often said, "Not only did he capture my heart, but he won over my boys." There was pride in her voice when she said it. Pride and relief. She'd found someone who accepted her world completely, chaos and all. As the music began to play, Tammy took a deep breath. She wasn't the maid of honor. That role went to Amy's best friend, Alicia Davis. But she didn't mind. There was no bitterness, no jealousy. In the past, she might have felt left out, maybe even hurt. But this version of Tammy had learned to let go of ego. She was simply happy to be there, to witness her sister's joy after years of pain. Amy had told people that she'd chosen Alicia because she'd been a rock through her divorce and new relationship. "I knew she'd say yes even before I asked," Amy said with a laugh. Tammy had been her maid of honor once during her wedding to Caleb Willingham in 2022, and now life had come full circle. Amy was returning the support. During the ceremony, the haunted tavern glowed softly with candlelight. The old wooden beams overhead creaked as guests held their breath. Amy and Brian exchanged vows in front of a small crowd, promising to love and protect each other. And the two little boys who giggled in the front row. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, applause filled the room. Tammy clapped the loudest, tears welling up behind her glasses. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a symbol of everything they'd survived: obesity, loss, addiction, grief, the public's cruel comments, and the fear that fame might destroy their bond as sisters. After the ceremony, photos were taken in the courtyard. The lanterns cast golden light across the cobblestones, and Tammy stood proudly beside Amy in every shot. Later, when those photos hit the internet, fans flooded social media. "Tammy looks amazing," one comment said. Another read, "I didn't even recognize her." For years, viewers had watched Tammy's health decline on television. They'd seen her frustration, her anger, her battles with food and oxygen tubes. Many had lost hope. But now she was proving everyone wrong. And yet, behind her smile, Tammy carried quiet thoughts of the past. She thought of Caleb, her late husband, the man she'd met and married in rehab. Their relationship had been intense, short-lived, and ultimately heartbreaking. His death in 2023 had shattered her for a time, but also pushed her to keep going. She'd told a friend once, "I have to live, for both of us." So on that Halloween night, surrounded by laughter and flickering candles, Tammy felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. She knew her journey wasn't over. She still had surgeries ahead, like the one to remove her excess skin, the final physical reminder of her old life. But she'd already come further than anyone had imagined. Amy's wedding was more than a celebration of love. It was a family's moment of redemption. After everything the Slaton sisters had endured, they were finally moving forward, lighter, freer, and together again. Tammy stood quietly in the corner as Amy and Brian shared their first dance. The music was slow and tender, the kind of song that made you remember every heartbreak you'd ever had. Tammy smiled, holding her hands together. For once, she didn't need to be in the spotlight. The joy of seeing her sister so happy was enough. When Amy looked over and caught her eye, the two shared a silent moment, a look that said everything their words never could. They'd fought, cried, screamed, and nearly lost each other, but they'd also survived. And for the Slaton sisters, survival was something sacred. The night stretched on with dancing and laughter echoing through the haunted tavern. And somewhere in the shadows, maybe the ghosts themselves smiled, because for the first time in a long time, the Slaton family had something that even death couldn't take away: love. The night air outside the Talbot Tavern was cool, almost electric, the kind of chill that feels alive. Lanterns flickered in the courtyard as laughter poured from the windows. Inside, Amy and Brian danced beneath strings of amber light while friends clapped and took photos on their phones. But Tammy had stepped outside for a moment, needing a breath, not because she was tired, but because she was feeling something she couldn't quite put into words. The sound of music and voices echoed faintly behind her as she stood near the stone wall that lined the tavern courtyard. The stars were dim that night, hidden behind wisps of autumn cloud, and the faint glow from the old inn painted the street in a soft, ghostly hue. She leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. No oxygen tube. No wheelchair. No nurse hovering beside her. Just her, standing, breathing, moving, living. It wasn't long ago that she'd been lying in a hospital bed, her body heavy with exhaustion and regret. She remembered how the doctors had looked at her, kind but uncertain, as if they didn't want to say out loud what she already knew. That she might not make it, that her body was giving up. She remembered the long nights in the hospital, staring at the ceiling, asking herself how it had come to this. Food had been her comfort, her shield, her escape. But it had also been her prison, and every pound she gained built another wall between her and the world outside. Now, standing here, no walls, no tubes, Tammy realized that she had broken free. When Amy came out to check on her, Tammy smiled. "You okay?" Amy asked softly, still wearing her lace gown, her veil now slightly crooked from the dancing. Tammy nodded. "I'm good. Just needed a second." Amy stepped closer and wrapped her arms around her sister. "You look amazing, Tam," Tammy chuckled. "You don't look too bad yourself, Mrs. Lavvern." They both laughed, the sound echoing into the Kentucky night. Moments like that, simple, real, were rare for them. Most of their lives had been filmed, edited, analyzed, and turned into entertainment. People had seen their highs and lows, their tears, their fights. But this was private. A sister holding another sister, both of them scarred but still standing. Tammy had learned something powerful in her journey. That change doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet moments when no one's watching. The days you choose to wake up and fight again, even when you're tired of fighting. When they went back inside, Brian was giving a toast. He stood by the table, holding a glass of champagne, his voice trembling with emotion. "To Amy," he said, "the woman who showed me what real love looks like. And to Gage and Glenn, who made me believe I could be more than I ever thought I could be." Amy wiped tears from her cheeks, and Tammy clapped, smiling wide. The guests cheered, glasses clinked, and the music swelled again. But amid all the celebration, something else hung in the air. A quiet acknowledgement that every person in that room had overcome something to be there. Tammy wasn't just attending her sister's wedding. She was reclaiming her life. Her weight loss journey had been public, but few understood what it had cost her. The endless doctor visits, the rehab, the emotional breakdowns that never made it to air. When she finally qualified for bariatric surgery, it wasn't just a procedure, it was a lifeline. The pain that followed was immense. Recovery wasn't glamorous. She'd woken up sore, weak, terrified that she might relapse. But each day she pushed herself a little further, first walking a few steps, then across a room, then outside into the sunlight. And when the weight began to fall off, the world started to see a different Tammy. But the truth was, the real transformation had begun long before the surgery. It began the day she decided she wanted to live. By 2023, Tammy had lost more than 500 pounds, an achievement that seemed impossible once. But with that victory came new challenges. The loose skin that hung from her body was a constant reminder of where she'd been. It caused infections, pain, and insecurity. During one emotional episode of 1000 LB Sisters, her doctor had told her that skin removal would take multiple operations and long healing phases. Tammy had stared at him in silence, overwhelmed. "That's a lot," she whispered. But later, when she finally got the approval for surgery, she broke down in tears. "I worked so hard for this," she said. "It's here. I can't believe it's finally happening." Now, at Amy's wedding, those results were visible for the first time. Her skin was tighter, her face more defined, her movements easier. It wasn't vanity, and it was victory. Every step she took that night was a statement that she had fought her way back from the brink. As the night went on, the sisters shared stories with guests, laughing over old memories. Amy joked about their childhood mischief, sneaking candy, watching scary movies, dreaming about love and fairy tale weddings. Tammy smiled, but when the conversation turned to Caleb, her expression softened. Amy reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Amy reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. They didn't need to speak. The loss of Caleb still lingered like a quiet ache between them. He'd passed away in 2023, not long after their marriage. It had broken her, but it had also fueled her resolve. She wanted to honor his memory by living the life he wanted for her. Healthy, happy, free. Amy whispered, "He'd be proud of you, Tam." Tammy nodded, her eyes glistening. "I hope so." Later, as the guests began to leave and the tavern grew quiet, Tammy stayed behind to help clean up. She gathered empty glasses, folded napkins, humming softly to herself. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Amy watching her. "What?" Tammy laughed. "Nothing," Amy said with a smile. "It's just seeing you like this. I don't know, Tam. You're glowing." Tammy looked around the emptying room, the soft glow of candles reflecting off the old wooden tables. "It feels like a new chapter," she said quietly, "for both of us." And it was. For the first time in years, both sisters were moving forward, not as reality stars or as tabloid names, but as women who had fought for their lives and won. Outside, the last guests disappeared into the misty Bardstown night. The tavern doors creaked closed, the lights dimmed, and the ghosts of the old inn, if they existed, seemed to settle back into their quiet watching. Tammy took one last look at her sister, now a bride, and smiled. Everything had changed. The world would see the photos tomorrow and talk about her transformation, her new body, her unrecognizable look. But what they wouldn't see was the truth, that the real transformation wasn't in her appearance. It was in her spirit. She wasn't just half the size she used to be. She was a whole new person. The following morning, the town of Bardstown was quiet. Dew clung to the grass, and the air smelled faintly of bourbon and damp earth. The Talbot Tavern sat still under the pale light, its windows dark after a night of celebration. Inside, empty glasses and half-melted candles marked the traces of laughter that had filled the room just hours before. The echoes of music had faded, replaced by silence. That kind of soft, haunting quiet that follows an unforgettable night. Tammy woke early. She sat on the edge of her bed, the hotel room filled with a gentle morning haze. Her phone buzzed with notifications, messages, tagged photos, fan reactions, news headlines already calling Amy's wedding the Halloween event of the year. She scrolled through them slowly. In one photo, Amy stood beside Brian, holding his hand and laughing. In another, Tammy herself appeared in the background, thinner, glowing, almost unrecognizable. She barely recognized her own reflection. The comments flooded in beneath the photos. "Tammy looks incredible. I didn't even realize that was her. So proud of how far she's come." For years, Tammy had read cruel words about herself online. Strangers had picked apart her life, her weight, her anger, her struggles. Every time she'd fallen, the internet had been there to laugh, to point, to judge. But now, for once, the comments were kind, supportive, hopeful. And that was new. She set the phone down and sat quietly for a while, watching the light crawl across the floorboards. Amy knocked softly and poked her head in. "You're up early," Tammy smiled. "Couldn't sleep." Amy stepped inside, barefoot, still wearing the faint remnants of last night's makeup. She sat next to her sister and leaned against her shoulder. "Thank you for coming," Amy whispered. "Of course I came," Tammy said softly. "You really think I'd miss it?" Amy laughed, her voice small and tired. "You look so different in those pictures, like a whole new person." Tammy's eyes softened. "I feel like one." Amy reached for her hand. "You did it, Tam. You really did it. You changed everything." Tammy hesitated before answering. "I didn't do it alone. You helped me even when you didn't think you did." Amy looked down, her expression turning thoughtful. "There were times I thought I'd lost you." "I know," Tammy said. "There were times I thought I'd lost me too." The sisters sat in silence, their fingers intertwined. For all their differences, the fights, the shouting matches, the tension that reality TV had amplified, this was what it always came down to: love. Quiet, fierce, imperfect love. Outside, the world was already talking about them again. The photos were everywhere. Tammy Slaton, unrecognizable. Amy Slaton, finally remarried. Fans analyzing every detail, speculating about what came next. But inside that small hotel room, none of it mattered. For the first time in years, Tammy felt grounded. She remembered a time when she couldn't even make it up a flight of stairs without help, when every breath felt like it might be her last. And now here she was, alive, awake, and looking toward the future. But the future wasn't without uncertainty. Over breakfast later that morning, Amy mentioned something that made Tammy pause. "Have you heard anything about Season 8 yet?" Tammy shook her head. "Nothing. You?" "Nope," Amy sighed. "I think the network's still deciding. Maybe after the holidays." Tammy frowned. She'd seen the rumors online, whispers that 1000 LB sisters might not return. Fans were panicking, posting comments like, "If the show gets canceled, I'm done with TLC." A few months earlier, Tammy had even liked one of those comments on TikTok. Fans took it as a hint that she knew something, maybe confirmation that the show was ending. But truthfully, even Tammy didn't know what was coming next. And in a strange way, she was okay with that. Reality TV had given her a platform, a voice, a chance to share her story. But it had also trapped her inside a version of herself that no longer existed. The angry, defensive woman from early seasons wasn't her anymore. She'd grown past that. She'd survived it. Still, there was fear, not of losing fame, but of what came after. Who was Tammy Slaton without the cameras? Without the edits, the producers, the endless pressure to perform? Maybe, she thought, she'd find out. That afternoon, Tammy joined Amy and Brian for a quiet lunch at a small diner in town. The boys sat in a booth nearby, playing with crayons and paper menus. For the first time in a long time, it felt like family. Amy looked across the table, her wedding ring catching the sunlight. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" Tammy asked. "Everything we've been through. The hospital trips, the arguments, me moving out, Michael leaving, Caleb passing." Amy's voice broke slightly. "And somehow, we're still here. We made it." Tammy smiled, her eyes glistening. "We're tough, Ames. Always have been." "You think things will calm down now?" Amy asked, half joking. Tammy laughed softly. "With us? Never." They both laughed until they cried. Later that evening, after returning home, Tammy scrolled through more online posts. There were new articles now, ones calling her inspirational, praising her transformation, comparing old and new photos. For the first time, she didn't cringe when she saw herself. She stopped on one image, her and Amy standing together. Outside the tavern, the wind in their hair, both of them smiling. It looked almost cinematic, like a scene from a film about resilience. That was when she realized something important. The world might see their story as reality TV, drama, entertainment, shock value. But to them, it was real life. Every scar, every tear, every hospital visit, every laugh, it all meant something. Tammy whispered to herself, "We made it this far. I'm not stopping now." She put down the phone and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, she heard kids playing. Dogs barking, the sounds of an ordinary neighborhood evening. For Tammy, ordinary had once been impossible, but now it was everything she wanted. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Slow, steady, easy. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't need to fight for air. That breath, quiet, simple, alive, was her victory. That night, Tammy sat alone in her living room, the TV flickering in the background, but her mind far away. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the floorboards. She had spent most of her life surrounded by noise, people talking, cameras clicking, producers asking for another take. But silence had a strange comfort now. It meant peace, not loneliness. On the coffee table lay a small photo frame Amy had given her that morning. Inside was a picture of the two sisters from the wedding, standing side by side, smiling wider than they had in years. Tammy traced the edge of the frame with her finger. There had been times she didn't think she'd live to see that day. Her life before had been small, not in meaning, but in movement. She remembered the hospital rooms, the feeding tubes, the wheelchairs, the constant dependence on others just to exist. The world had felt like something she could only watch, never touch. And yet here she was. Every scar on her body told the story of a fight she didn't back down from. Every stretch mark was proof of survival, of a body that had carried her through storms most people could never imagine. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her doctor, checking in about her recovery after the skin removal surgery. Tammy smiled and typed back, "Doing great, feeling better than ever." And she meant it. That surgery had terrified her. She had gone into it unsure if her body could handle another round of anesthesia, another round of healing. But when she woke up and looked in the mirror weeks later, it wasn't just about how she looked. It was about how she felt. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel trapped inside her own skin. The weight loss was dramatic, over 500 pounds gone. But the real transformation was something you couldn't measure. It was in the way she carried herself, the calm in her voice, the patience in her eyes. In interviews, she had often been asked what motivated her most. The truth wasn't fame or fans. It was moments like this, the simple joy of being able to walk to the kitchen, to drive herself to a store, to sleep without oxygen, to wake up without pain. She opened her window and felt the cold Kentucky night air against her skin. The moonlight spread across the field behind her house, soft and silver. Somewhere down the road, Amy's house glowed faintly, a warm spot of yellow in the distance. She thought of her little nephews, Gage and Glenn, probably asleep by now, their toys scattered across the floor. Amy had found happiness again. That thought filled Tammy's chest with warmth. She had worried when Amy announced her engagement so soon after meeting Brian. But now she could see it. The calmness in Amy's smile, the way Brian looked at her, the way the boys felt safe around him. Amy had once stood by Tammy's hospital bed, crying, begging her to keep fighting. And now the roles had shifted. Tammy had become the strong one, the steady, grounded presence. Life had a strange way of turning the wheel like that. She remembered what the doctor had told her after the skin removal consultation. "You've got head-to-toe loose skin. It's going to take several operations and a lot of healing." At the time, the thought had overwhelmed her, but now she looked down at her arms and smiled. Healing wasn't just about surgery. It was about learning to love what was left behind. The next few weeks after the wedding were filled with change. The wedding photos went viral. News outlets ran headlines calling Tammy's transformation jaw-dropping and unbelievable. Clips from 1000 LB Sisters resurfaced. The old Tammy, angry and bedridden, compared against the new Tammy, standing strong, glowing, confident. It felt strange. Watching those old clips, she didn't hate that version of herself. She pitied her. That girl had been scared, lost, buried under pain she didn't know how to talk about. People thought they were watching someone lazy or defiant, but really, they were watching someone in survival mode. Sometimes she'd pause the video and stare at the screen. The woman gasping for air, snapping at her family, crying in frustration. "You made it," she whispered to the image. "You made it out. The fans noticed it too." Her TikTok comments were full of messages from people saying she inspired them, that they were starting their own health journeys because of her. She read every message. Some nights she cried while reading them, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She had never expected to be anyone's role model. She had just wanted to live. The holidays came and went quietly. Amy and Brian hosted Thanksgiving that year, filling their house with laughter and the smell of cornbread and turkey. Tammy brought dessert, her first time baking in years. At dinner, Amy raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." Tammy smiled. "To surviving the old ones," she replied. Everyone laughed, and for a moment, it felt like the world was exactly as it should be. But there were still rumors. Fans wondering if 1000 LB Sisters would return for Season 8. Online blogs speculated about network decisions, budget cuts, contracts. Tammy saw it all. She didn't know the truth, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Whether the cameras rolled again or not, she had already won. The show had captured her darkest moments, but it had also forced her to face herself. Without it, maybe she wouldn't have pushed so hard to change. Maybe she wouldn't have survived. If it ended, that was okay. The world had seen enough of her pain. Now it was time for them to see her peace. One evening, she sat on her porch as the sun dipped below the trees. She thought of Caleb, her late husband, and whispered a quiet prayer. They had shared something real, even if it was short-lived. Losing him had almost broken her, but it had also taught her to keep going. "Hope you're proud of me," she said softly into the wind. A bird landed on the railing in front of her, chirping once before flying away. She smiled. Inside, her phone buzzed again, a text from Amy. "Movie night at mine tomorrow?" "The boys miss their Aunt Tammy," Tammy typed back. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." She turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady, calm. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet certainty that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just a new chapter. She had spent years fighting her body, then fighting to save it. Now she was finally learning to live inside it. When morning came, she stood in front of the mirror again. No makeup, no filters, just her. A woman who had once been trapped inside herself, now standing free, she smiled. Not the forced smile of someone pretending for the cameras, but a real one. Soft, genuine, peaceful. "Hey, beautiful," she whispered to her reflection. "You did it," the reflection smiled back. Outside, the day was waiting, and for the first time in a long, long time, Tammy Slaton stepped into it. Lighter, freer, and alive.